Morning everyone, hope you all had a lovely evening. I'm going to ease you into the day with a sort of romp through potential technologies of the future and from a sort of CIO IT perspective, what does that mean? As an IT professional, I want to make sure that we support your digital dexterity and the way our working lives are going to develop over the next 10, 15 years. So I'm going to take a look. But first of all, what do I mean by digital dexterity? So the grey box there is the Gartner definition. It's not a coin of phrase that I came up with. This is a Gartner phrase, but I do quite like it. It's the sustained organisational capability to fluidly and dynamically reconfigure and deploy both human and digital resources at the speed of rapidly changing technological and market conditions. But I like the next sentence. Digital dexterity comes not just from technology, but from people using digital technologies to think, act and organise themselves in different ways. And that's what you've all been talking about yesterday and what you're talking about over the course of today as well. So IT professionals are needing to plan ahead for this to ensure that IT doesn't become the block for your digital futures. So let's take a quick look. How might we organise ourselves differently? So we're talking about the place of work here. How might we organise ourselves differently in the future? Perhaps our place of work might look a bit like this. So these are some of the emerging technologies, and you probably see pictures like this. Some of you may even be using some of these technologies in some of the things that you're doing, particularly in research areas perhaps. Or might it look a bit like this? And I'm increasingly seeing this kind of workspace, and particularly in the HE sector, working with your estates colleagues, sort of more dynamic spaces, project-based learning, things like that. So you're probably seeing it all over the place, which is becoming a challenge for IT as well, because where's the power? And actually, this is becoming more and more the place of work. I do like the cat sneaking a look in there. And actually that's mine, that's my preferred place of work, and I spend 1/5 of my working week there or elsewhere. In fact, I don't have an office, I just plonk myself wherever I need to be, depending on what technology I'm using for the day, and this is going to become increasingly common, and you're probably all doing it. So what does the near future hold for our graduates? So these are a number of Gartner predictions, and this is the near future. So within the next few years, 25% of digital workers will use a virtual employee assistant on a daily basis. That's up from 2% today. I don't know whether any of you are the 2%. I'm not yet. And virtual assistants will take on routine tasks and drive you towards non-routine work, which will improve your experience and increase your productivity. Within the next 4 years, 25% of employee interactions with applications will happen via voice. That's currently at 3%. I'm sure you've all come across the ones all listed at the bottom. I'm increasingly starting to use it. In fact, I don't write text messages anymore, I dictate them to my watch. So it's starting to sneak in there, whether you like it or not. Over the next 4 years, frontline workers' use of work-stream collaboration applications to drive teamwork and productivity will increase from 5% to 20%. And you've had several sessions mentioning Teams. There are other equally good collaborative tools starting to emerge. By 2020, 30% of large enterprises will adopt augmented reality applications on mobile devices. And within the same time span, augmented reality will surpass virtual reality with head-mounted display sets in the workplace. Within the next 3 years, 1 in 5 workers engaged in mostly non-routine tasks will rely on AI to do their jobs. And by 2022, at least 40% of new application development projects will have artificial intelligence co-developers on the team. Don't tell my developers that. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm looking forward to it. By 2021, 75% of pre-built reports will be replaced with augmented or automated insights, which will alleviate the need for your specialist data science services. You'll see that in a lot of systems that you're buying now, the reporting capability is already embedded within it, and it will get better. And this is what we were talking about a minute ago. An increase in remote working is going to mean that you can use your spaces more efficiently and differently in the future. And that is starting to happen now. I'm increasingly seeing it. in the sort of security area, 75% of organisations will restructure risk and security governance to address new cyber-physical systems, convergent IT, Internet of Things, and physical security needs. So by 2021, organisations that bypass privacy requirements and are caught lacking in privacy will pay 100% more in compliance. So there's a sort of frightening side to what we're talking about. So, thanks to new and evolving technologies, the world is now at our fingertips, more than it ever has been before. The way we work is going to continue to change rapidly, and the need for highly skilled developers of technology is going to increase. There is a rise in the gig economy, and you're probably seeing that in a lot of your alumni. And the traditional ways of working and practices and analogue practices that used to create barriers to this sort of flexible working are coming down, and freelancing is becoming more and more prevalent. And pathways and the ways that our graduates will go into their work will change and are changing. So meet Ethan. So he's a recent graduate. Is anyone here from Hertfordshire? No? Yes? He's one of yours. He will call himself a digital native. He's shaping his career by embracing changes in technology and new ways of working. He started his digital dexterity on the Xbox. And his mother, if you haven't guessed it, his mother is actually me, was rather worried that he sat in his room and didn't talk to anybody. Well, actually, he was gaming with people all over the world. So that's where he sort of started, unbeknown to him. His dexterity increased because he's grown up in a world of rising mobile phones, social media, etc. And he discovered music and started to study music, and increasingly he started to use online resources to supplement what he was doing. And he had some forward visionary teachers that introduced him quite early on to some online resources and collaboration tools, composing packages, and things like SoundCloud. He left school and decided not to go to university because he was so busy creating his online collaboration with other like-minded people, and he started to compose music for a gaming project and used Kickstarter to raise the money for this gaming project. And the team he collaborated with were from all over the world, and he never met them face to face, and he was quite successful with that. To the extent that he continued to use the gig economy to supplement his student loan when he went to university, at a great relief to me. And he studied abroad in Japan for a year and utilised technology in everything he did when he was there, from his travel to keeping in touch with his family and friends to his banking, everything. While he was there, incidentally, there was an earthquake, a 7.8 magnitude earthquake, which worried me, and I was sitting in a meeting and got a Facebook notification to say he was safe, because it has a little module in Facebook that identifies whether you're in a danger zone and asks you if you're okay, and then tells everybody in your Facebook, which was quite interesting. That was a few years ago. So he continues to keep in touch with his friends in Japan. He graduated, he's now a freelancer, and he's funding himself through the National Film and Television School. So that he is now starting to be very digital in his career, so it's there now, that gig economy. And when I asked him what the biggest barrier he has to his digital dexterity, he actually said broadband speed, rather loudly. So there he is. The way that universities are interacting with this sort of evolving ecosystem is challenging. And the digital world is sort of out there now, and it's very, very rapidly evolving. And in fact, it's starting to blur into our personal lives. So I sat in a supplier demonstration a couple of weeks ago, an HR supplier demonstration, where they're connecting to Alexa. So in a few months, if you actually have this particular supplier, you'll be able to wake up in the morning with a terrible headache and say, Alexa, please inform work I'm not going to be in today, and it'll kick off a workflow and do that for you. Seriously. So, if so many digital capabilities are already available, what does the next 10 years hold in store for us? So the stuff in the blue box is the stuff that I'm starting to sort of keep an eye on and think, how might that impact the way that we're delivering IT in York St John. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm going to explore a few of them with you. Now, these are sort of further out what's going to happen in the future. And while I go through the next few slides, just keep this quote in mind. I think it's quite a good one. Most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10. So these predictions are from the likes of Microsoft, from Gartner, think tanks, so they are predictions. But the one thing they all say is that over the next 10 years, the pace of technology adoption is going to accelerate. If you think it's fast now, it's going to get faster. Traditional business applications are going to disappear as we know them, and applications will harness transformative technologies, AI, IoT and blockchain to deliver a seamless experience with embedded analytics, recommendation engines, codeless interaction and virtual personal assistants. So you're all going to end up with a seamless and personalised experience where you don't have to log into multiple platforms and you can use them on any device anywhere. Won't that be nice? We're getting there on some of that. Autonomous things will proliferate, and there'll be a shift from standalone intelligent things to swarms of collaborative intelligent things. Multiple devices will work together either independently of people or with human input. So here's an example. The UK government is currently developing an autonomous mothership that will transport a fleet of self-piloting drones which will carry a swarm of six-legged insects-like robots called blade bugs that have suction pads that will cling to wind turbines out at sea and carry out repairs. And if you don't believe me, there's the Times article last week. I was slightly underwhelmed with the mothership. It just looks like a boat to me, but they called it a mothership. But you can Google that one if you want. It's a £4 million project and that's already underway. Augmented analytics will be a key feature of analytics embedded in these autonomous things, and they'll interact with users, especially autonomous assistants and interfaces. And we're going to end up with an increasingly immersive experience where the model will shift from one of technology literate people to one of people literate technology. Conversational platforms will change the way we interact with the digital world, and the burden of translating intent will move from the user to the computer. So waking up and telling Alexa you're not feeling well may well turn into Alexa waking you up saying you've got a temperature, I've ordered paracetamol, and I've informed work you won't be in. And that sort of technology is being sort of fueled, your smartwatches, that Alexa translation might well be detecting that through the likes of smartwatches, etc. in the future. And those rely on edge technologies. And edge technology is there now. You're using it now, but this underpins a lot of what the autonomous things will need. It's a practice of processing data near the edge of your network where the data is being generated instead of centralised data processing. It solves a lot of issues like high wide area network costs and unacceptable latency. It involves intelligent things on the edge of a spectrum of endpoint devices, like in that triangle there. So you've got speakers, screens, smartphones, PCs, and complex devices like cars, maybe power stations. And the edge systems will connect with hyperscale back-end services directly through edge servers in the middle of that triangle there. 5G, which is just being launched, is really, really important to actually utilising edge technologies. And you are utilising them now. So face recognition on your phone and things like smartwatches, that's edge technology working now, but it's going to become increasingly important. And another area that's going to change things somewhat is the blockchain technology, if you're aware of that. So that blockchain represents an alternative to the centralised trust models that make up most record keeping today. So we place our trust in governments and institutions and our own institutions to hold the single version of the truth in databases. But blockchain changes that trust model. It uses public blockchains and removes the central authorities and therefore the sort of friction costs associated with those. So it's going to become, it has great potential for the financial services, but also government, healthcare, supply chains, content distribution, and Gartner predict that by 2022, more than 80% of higher education institutions will be issuing some form of digital credential using blockchain technology. Smart spaces. I really like smart spaces. This is where everything sort of comes together to create that immersive space. And I couldn't find an actual picture of a smart space existing currently, but this is pretty close. So this is Amager Bak. It's a power plant in Copenhagen. It opened a few years ago. It's actually a tourist attraction. You can look it up. It's a waste burning plant. It operates 24 hours a day. All of its functions are automated, from collecting the waste, burning the waste, disposing of the ash. Only 2 people needed to operate it, but it also combines as a recreational resource. You can see the ski slope that goes down the side. It's got a climbing wall on the top, restaurants, and it has become a big tourist attraction. And they carefully monitor the emissions and make sure that the people using it as a resource aren't getting polluted. It's really clever. And that, I think, is stepping in the direction of smart spaces. And I couldn't get away with with talking to you about the future of technology without mentioning quantum computing. Now, I'm not a physicist, but and it's not here yet, but if it happens, it will transform a lot of the things that you are talking about here. It's a type of non-classical computing that operates on quantum state of subatomic particles that represent information as elements denoted as quantum bits or qubits, and a qubit can hold all possible results simultaneously until read. I'll carry on. Qubits can be linked with other qubits, a property known as entanglement, and quantum algorithms manipulate linked qubits in their undetermined entangled state. And the qubits resolve a solution when read, so therefore quantum computing is a massively parallel process that scales exponentially as you add in more and more qubits. So you got that? What that means for us is super, super powerful processing, and when it does arrive, it can, it's a game changer. And for me, what on earth does that mean to cybersecurity? So we need to keep an eye on when that lands. This is a Gartner slide, so some of the things I've been talking about, and I could go on for hours about some of the stuff that's out there that potentially is going to hit us over the next 10 years. But this is quite interesting. So this is Gartner sort of saying to how might some of those technologies change the way we work. And Gartner sort of saying, and I agree with them, digital dexterity becomes critical, and that's what you've all been talking about. You clearly know that. The pace of technology adoption is going to accelerate. We're going to monitor digital dexterity. Learning is going to be continuous and personal, and HR and IT are going to have to become friends. AI predominates. They predict robo-bosses becoming common. What they mean by that is that tasks will be generated by AI for workers. Physical workspaces become smart. Virtual personal assistants will become common, and jobs and duties continuously change and may be eliminated. And the gig economy is going to thrive. Employees are going to get employment on marketplaces, jobs will become deconstructed and workers will have portfolios, employees will have their own tools and workspaces, and work will be done through networks. And my son's an example of that starting to happen, and I think we'll see it increasingly in other jobs and other roles as well, and roles that we don't know exist yet. So, with all of that in mind, how are IT professionals preparing for the potential emerging technologies? Well, there are a number of challenges for IT professionals. There's a growing demand to deliver unified contextual experiences and workspaces and new devices. And there's 4 areas where I think that IT professionals really need to focus on. Building staff skills and the knowledge to support these emerging technologies. And it's really encouraging that universities and higher education in general is embracing those in degrees and apprenticeships. So we will see a workforce of the future hopefully coming through. In the sort of finance and budgeting, securing investment to explore the new but maintain the existing while we build the new. Culture and how these new and emerging technologies are changing not just the way we work, but the way that the role of IT works and is perceived. And legacy technologies. I'll just explore those 4 with you just a little bit more. So in the area of skills, and particularly in cyber, it's becoming increasingly difficult to attract and maintain the skills needed. It's such a fast-moving area. And that is a challenge to most organisations. The way IT works is changing, and few IT departments have got the luxury of years of development for their staff. CIOs and business leaders are increasingly wanting rapid change, and dare I say it can be prone, not my boss who's sitting at the back, can be prone to blaming IT for being too slow to react to those. And as a result, a lot of IT departments and CIOs are reacting quickly rather than planning very carefully for the future. In the sort of cultural area, responsibility is shifting to everybody for cyber. It's not the domain of the IT department anymore, and actually culturally IT need to accept that. IT professionals have traditionally been the gateway and drivers of technology adoption. That's not the case anymore. The very fact that everybody's sitting here talking about technology, it just says that that's no longer the case, and IT professionals need to adapt to that. Traditional IT jobs and roles are changing rapidly. There's far more specialisms, but also the role now requires a lot more emotional intelligence. You can't sit in a back room and program anymore on your own. And there's a lot of misunderstanding about the role of sort of traditional IT or IT department in emerging technologies like cloud technologies. But I quite like that little beer map there. The roles are just moving somewhere else. Your DBA still exists, it just might be with a supplier. And your IT department still needs to understand that role and still needs to make sure you're getting good value for money from it. And the actual operating model to support that is emerging. Budgets. That lack of internal specialist skill set is causing problems to IT departments that are working in traditional operating and finance operating models. They're increasingly going to need shared service, flexible teams and contractors to do the work because it's new technology. By 2023, 50% of the network infrastructure software will be based in cloud-native technologies, not your on-premise technologies, and that is a challenge to cost and predicting cost models because it's an emerging market. So contract and supplier management is increasingly going to need IT specialist knowledge, and where does that sit? And I'm really, really worried about that innovation space. A lot of the stuff you're talking about. I think we're really good at keeping the lights on. You'll have an IT department that keeps the lights on and you'll do an element of that. Change, every organisation has a level of change, portfolio management, programme management, your business cases, the way you do that kind of thing. Innovation, I think, which is what I call a safe place to fail, given some of the stuff I've been talking about, and given that we don't know how it's going to affect business, how are we as universities going to keep at the front of the curve with that and explore some of those innovative ideas? And I think we need to develop a way of having a safe place to fail, understanding that we need to explore some things that will cost a bit of money, but that only so many of them will go through to the formal change process. And I'll be working with York St John to do some of that. And finally, legacy technologies. So IT departments currently are retrofitting new technologies in and around your legacy stuff. And that's what I call technical debt. And it can slow down your ability to fuel change because you're adding in more complexity, which breaks more things, and it's a vicious circle. So if we fail to invest in the underpinning, the invisible stuff underneath it all, you could end up actually slowing down your ability to adopt digital dexterity. So we need to be investing, so that we can get to that seamless experience, and that's things like hybrid integration layers. And I'll leave you, you don't want that access denied, that's what I'm on about. And I'll leave you with that. So as you all go forward into your digital futures, just spare a thought for your IT team that are still trying to untangle your digital past. And every IT department has got one of those diagrams, I'll guarantee you. Thank you, everyone. Have we got time for questions?
We certainly have, yes.
Brilliant.
So, any questions?
If there are any. Don't ask me about quantum computing, I am not a physicist.
Any questions for Emma?
Thank you very much, Emma. So how do we resist all this? Hegel responded to the challenge against 19th century conservatism and the Prussian state by saying, it's pointless, the real is rational, the rational is real. There is nothing you can do. You are no longer autonomous, you no longer have any agency in the coming change. And my perception of the way that Gartner present things is always that they present this as inevitable. There is never in there the idea that we might reflect and reject. So where is the space for that reflection and rejection? Maybe we don't want a gig economy. Lots of people in the gig economy don't want it. Musicians do, filmmakers do, delivery drivers don't.
It's a very good question. I completely concur with you. And I think whilst we might not be able to control the pace of some of this change, I think universities are most definitely, and that's the innovation space as well. I think that innovation space is about exploring first some of those technologies to see how best from an ethical, etc. point of view we can exploit them. We are, we should be in the HE sector at the forefront of that, and I'm worried that we're not. I'm worried that we're actually adopting some of those technologies after. So I think the answer is that actually we need to, as a sector, be up there in that top of the triangle.
Any more questions?
Great.
No? Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Emma, for giving us a very interesting and insightful
Thank you.
review. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.